My name is Maria R. Mink. I'm 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I had been with Ethan for almost 4 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Clicked immediately, and within 6 months, we were living together. He worked in logistics management. I worked in operations support for a medical supply company. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. Stable. At least that was the word I kept using for us. Stable. We talked about marriage more than once. Last Christmas, we even looked at rings together at a jewelry store in the mall. I remember pointing out a sapphire ring, elegant deep blue classic, without being flashy. Ethan smiled and squeezed my hand, and I remember thinking that moment meant something. I did not know he would go back later in his own mind and bury that future long before he ever shattered it in public. The night everything collapsed was supposed to be a celebration. My cousin Marcus was throwing an engagement party at his house in the suburbs. The place looked beautiful. Professionally landscaped yard, warm lights strung over the patio. About 40 people moving in and out of the kitchen and living room with drinks in their hands and easy smiles on their faces. It should have felt safe. Instead, when I think back on it now, it feels like the stage where my life split open. Ethan had been acting strange all week. Distant, short-tempered, irritated by little things that normally would not have mattered. I asked him twice if something was wrong, and both times he brushed it off, blaming work stress. He said deadlines were a mess, that his manager was on his back, that he was exhausted. He had been staying late at the office 3 or 4 nights that week. One night, I even offered to bring him dinner, but he told me not to bother. Said he would just grab something downstairs. We arrived at Marcus' house around 7 o'clock. The party was already loud and alive. Music was coming through outdoor speakers. People were gathered in little circles around the patio heaters. Inside the kitchen island was crowded with half-finished drinks and appetizer plates. I was talking with Marcus and 2 friends near the center of the room when Ethan walked up holding a glass of wine. His face was flushed. I could tell immediately he had already been drinking. "Can we talk?" he asked. His tone was not private. It was not soft. It was loud enough that Marcus stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence and looked between us. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's wrong?" He looked at me with a strange, hard expression I had never seen before. "I'm serious. We need to talk about us." I glanced around and felt that first cold ripple of embarrassment. A few people had already gone quiet. Marcus's fiancée Jennifer was watching from across the room, concern written all over her face. "Okay," I said. "Let's step outside. No!" He cut me off before I could move. His voice got louder. "I'm tired of pretending." For one suspended second, I did not understand what he meant. Then he kept going. "You know what, I don't think this is going to work." My stomach dropped so suddenly, it felt physical, like missing a step in the dark. The music around us seemed to turn distorted, too loud, and too far away at the same time. "Ethan," I said quietly, "this is not the place." Then he said the words that still echo in my head sometimes when the room is too quiet. You could never be a good wife. I'm not going to marry you." Everything stopped. I mean that literally. The room went silent. 40 people, maybe more, all staring at us. I could feel heat rushing into my face, my hands tightening at my sides, but I forced myself to stay still. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if he was drunk enough not to know what he was saying or sober enough to mean every word. The worst part was his eyes. They were not confused. They were not emotional. They were sharp, almost cruel, like he wanted me to react, like he wanted the scene. And I did not give it to him. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not ask him why. I just turned around, picked up my jacket from the chair near the front door, and walked out of the house. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "What just happened?" Then the room filled with murmurs, lower, now more poisonous, the sound of people trying to piece together a disaster while it was still warm. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no phone calls, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing, shaky and uneven. By the time I got back to the apartment, my hands were trembling so badly I had to sit down in the dark for almost an hour before I could think clearly. I kept replaying the scene over and over. The way he said it, the way everyone stared, the way I had felt stripped of something in front of people who had known us for years. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lauren, one of Ethan's closest friends from college. "Do you even know what happened after you left?" I stared at the message for nearly a full minute before I typed back. What? The three dots appeared instantly. Can I call you? Yeah, I wrote. My phone rang 5 seconds later. Hey, Lauren, said the second I picked up. Her voice sounded tight, like she had been holding something in for too long. There was noise behind her, the dull echo of the party still going, people talking, glasses, clinking laughter, that now felt completely disconnected from reality. I don't even know how to say this, but you need to know. My hand tightened around the phone. Just say it. She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might back out. Then she took a breath. After you left, Ethan completely broke down. He started crying, saying he didn't mean what he said, that he was just overwhelmed. But that's not the worst part. My stomach dropped again. What's the worst part? I heard her shift like she was stepping away from the crowd to somewhere quieter. There was someone else there tonight. You know Daniel Wright, Marcus's younger coworker, works in finance. Always dressed like he's going to a photo shoot. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly who she meant. Yeah, I know him. Lauren's voice lowered. Ethan's been seeing his ex-girlfriend. Her name is Vanessa. For at least 2 months. For a second, everything went completely still. Not quiet, not calm, just empty, like the ground beneath me had disappeared, and my body had not caught up yet. What? The word barely came out. I didn't know until tonight. I swear. Lauren rushed. After you left, Vanessa came up to him. She didn't hesitate. She just wrapped her arms around him, and he leaned into her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not like friends, not like anything innocent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears now. And then she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I heard her say something. She told him, "You said you were going to end it clean." This wasn't the plan. That's when everything clicked. I confronted her in the bathroom about 20 minutes ago. She admitted it. I sat there in the dark, staring at nothing. She said it started at some work event back in September. Lauren went on filling the silence. I could not. They ran into each other, started talking, and then it just happened. That's how she said it, like it was some accident. But 2 months isn't an accident, Maria. That's a decision. Over and over again, I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay present. Is he still there? Yeah, she said quietly. He's still here. Some people are comforting him, like he's the one who got hurt. But honestly, most of them look uncomfortable. Jennifer is furious. I think she wants them both gone. Thanks for telling me, I said. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated that she could hear it. What are you going to do? I stared into the darkness of the apartment, the walls that had once felt like the beginning of something permanent. I don't know yet. We hung up, and I sat there for a long time without moving. Eventually, something shifted inside me. Not closure, not even acceptance, just a cold, sharp clarity. I stood up, turned on the lamp, and walked straight to my laptop. If I was going to understand what had really been happening, I needed more than words. I logged into our shared bank account, the one we had opened 2 years ago for rent, utilities, groceries, the one we both contributed to every month, because it was supposed to make things easier, transparent, fair. At first, everything looked normal. Rent payments, electric bills, internet grocery runs. Then I started noticing things. A charge from a restaurant downtown. Provisions upscale. I had never been there. $180 2 months ago. Then another charge from the same place 3 weeks later, $210. I scrolled further. There was a hotel charge 4 weeks ago. $340 at a boutique hotel 15 minutes from our apartment. That weekend, Ethan had told me he was at a work conference out of state. My hands went cold. I kept scrolling. There were more. 11 charges in total that did not make sense. Places we had never gone. Expenses I had never seen. Nights he had explained away with late meetings, deadlines, exhaustion. I started taking screenshots of everything, every transaction, every date, every lie that now had a receipt attached to it. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen casting long shadows across the room. Every hour that passed made things clearer. Every memory I had tried to justify now fit into place in a way that made me feel sick. Every time he said he was too tired to go out, every time he snapped at me over something small, every time he pulled away without explanation, it had never been about stress. It had been about her. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, I heard the apartment door unlock. Ethan walked in quietly, like he was hoping I would still be asleep. He was still wearing the same clothes from the party. His hair was messy, his face looked drained like whatever performance he had put on the night before had finally collapsed. He froze when he saw me sitting at the table. "We need to talk," I said. He dropped his keys on the counter and crossed his arms, immediately defensive. "I know I messed up last night. I was drunk. I didn't mean, how long have you been sleeping with Vanessa?" The words cut straight through whatever excuse he had prepared. His face went pale completely. "What?" he said, but there was no conviction behind it. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice steady, in a way that surprised even me. "Lauren told me, and I checked the account." I turned the laptop toward him. He stared at the screen, at the highlighted charges, at the proof laid out in cold, undeniable detail. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For a moment, he said nothing, then his shoulders dropped. "It just happened," he said quietly. I let out a short, hollow breath. 2 months isn't just happened. 2 months is a relationship. 2 months is a choice you made every single day. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the kitchen, like he was trying to find the right version of the truth to present. "I was confused," he said finally. "You and I have been together for so long, and everything just felt routine. Vanessa made me feel something again. Something different." I stared at him. "So you humiliated me in front of 40 people because you were bored. That's not fair." "No," I said, my voice rising now, sharp and uncontrollable. "What's not fair is that I spent 4 years building a life with someone who was already building something else behind my back. What's not fair is that I was thinking about marriage while you were using our shared money to pay for hotel rooms with someone else." He flinched, but he did not deny it. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I really am. I made a mistake. Can we just talk about this? Can we try to fix it?" I looked at him for a long moment. Then I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix." His expression shifted, panic starting to creep in. "Maria, I want you out of the apartment by the end of the week." He blinked at me, stunned. "This is my place too. The lease is in my name," I said. "You moved in after I had already been here for a year. Check the paperwork if you don't believe me." He stared at me like he had never seen me before. "You're really going to throw me out?" "You threw us away the second you decided I wasn't enough," I said quietly. "I'm just making it official." For a second, I thought he might argue, might yell, might try to turn it around on me again. Instead, he turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. A few seconds later, I heard the bedroom door slam, then silence, then faintly the sound of him crying through the wall. I sat there at the table, staring at the screen full of evidence, and realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't feel guilty. Ethan moved out 4 days later. There was nothing dramatic about it by then. No screaming, no shattered plates, no last-minute confession big enough to change what had already rotted through the center of us. The whole process was cold and mechanical, which somehow made it worse. 4 years reduced to boxes, receipts, and short sentences spoken without looking at each other. At first, he tried to take things that were not his. The coffee table, a bookshelf I had bought before we even met. Even the good blender, which would have been almost funny if I had not already been operating on pure emotional numbness. But I had receipts saved in a folder on my computer, because I am that kind of person, organized, careful, stupidly practical, even when my life is collapsing. I pulled up the files, showed him the dates, and one by one he backed down. The conversations between us were stripped to logistics. "I'm taking the dishes. Those were a gift from my mother." "Fine. The lamp stays." Whatever, it was not a breakup anymore. It was an inventory. On Saturday morning, his parents arrived with a rented U-Haul. His father barely glanced at me. His mother gave me this tight, pitying look, as if I were the unfortunate complication in her son's difficult week, instead of the woman he had humiliated and betrayed. I did not explain anything. I did not defend myself. People who want to misunderstand you will do it even when the truth is standing right in front of them. He carried out the last box just before noon. For one brief second, he paused near the door, like he might say something meaningful, something that would sound like accountability instead of regret wrapped in self-pity. But he did not. He just looked tired, hollow. Then he left. The silence afterward was almost violent. I stood in the middle of the apartment and listened to it. The air felt different, as if the walls had exhaled. I thought I might break down then finally, but I did not. I just stood there staring at the empty space where his shoes used to be by the door and felt a strange aching kind of relief. Vanessa, on the other hand, did not stay quiet. 2 days after Ethan moved out, I got a long text message from her, 5 paragraphs. I'm not exaggerating, it was full of polished lines about how she had never meant for things to go this far, how she respected what Ethan and I had, and how she hoped this would not damage her relationship with Marcus and the rest of the family circle any further. She even used phrases like, I take full responsibility, which somehow made it sound even more insulting, as if she were drafting a statement for a workplace scandal instead of speaking to a woman whose life she had helped detonate. I did not respond. I deleted the message, blocked her number, and kept moving. 2 days later, Marcus called me. I heard everything he said after I answered. His voice was low serious, in a way I had not heard from him before. Vanessa gave me her side, but I wanted yours, so I told him. Everything, the party, the humiliation, Lauren's phone call, the affair, the bank statements, the hotel charges, the lies about work, the months of it, the way Ethan had come home that morning and tried to call betrayal confusion. Marcus did not interrupt once. He just listened. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line, then he exhaled. Maria? I'm sorry. I had no idea it was that bad. I don't think any of us did. No, he said quietly. And I'm not making excuses for either of them. What they did was beyond messed up. I closed my eyes for a second. There was something unexpectedly comforting in hearing someone say it plainly. No minimizing, no softening the edges, because one of the people involved happened to be connected to the family. For what it's worth, Marcus continued, Jennifer already kicked Vanessa out of the wedding party. She was supposed to be one of the bridesmaids. That's over now. And Ethan isn't coming to the reception either. Jennifer wanted him completely uninvited, but I'm trying to keep the peace enough to get through the ceremony. That's it. It gave me a grim kind of satisfaction, but not peace. Nothing was going to make this feel fair. There was no social consequence, dramatic enough to match the humiliation of realizing someone had been dismantling your future behind your back while still sleeping beside you at night. About 2 weeks later, Ethan reached out through Instagram. The message was long, emotional rambling in the way people get when they are trying to sound honest but are mostly just panicking. He said he had made the biggest mistake of his life, that he wanted to meet and talk, that he finally understood what we had, that Vanessa was not who he thought she was, and that I was the one he should have chosen all along. That line sat in my chest like poison, should have chosen. As if I had ever been part of some competition, as if 4 years together had still left room for him to frame love like a decision between options on a shelf. I did not even open the full message. I blocked him on Instagram, then on Facebook, then through email for good measure. That should have been the end of it. But a few days ago, Tyler, a mutual friend, who has always been incapable of staying out of complicated situations, called me and said, You want to know the real reason Ethan's suddenly trying to come back? I almost told him I did not care. Almost. Instead, I said, Go ahead. Tyler lowered his voice like he was about to share classified information. Vanessa was seeing someone else the whole time. I said nothing. She had an actual boyfriend, a guy from her office named Grant. Ethan found out because he saw messages on her phone. When he confronted her, she basically told him he was just a fling. She never planned for it to get serious. Apparently, she said Grant was the real relationship. I leaned back against my kitchen counter and let the silence stretch. Tyler kept going. Ethan lost it. They had some huge fight. Vanessa walked out. And now, suddenly, he's trying to rewrite history and come back to you like none of this happened. Of course he was. Of course the apology arrived right after his fantasy collapsed. Not when he humiliated me. Not when he got caught. Not even when I threw him out. Only when the woman he helped destroy us for made it clear he had never mattered to her the way I once did. I thanked Tyler for telling me and ended the call. Then I stood there in the quiet apartment, one hand still resting on the counter, and felt something settle inside me. Not revenge, not joy, just clarity. Ethan did not miss me because he finally understood my worth. He missed me because the woman he gambled everything for had reminded him what it feels like to be disposable. Once I knew the truth, everything about Ethan's sudden remorse made sense. It was never about revelation. It was never about him waking up one morning, flooded with guilt, finally understanding the depth of what he had done to me. It was about collapse. His. Vanessa had discarded him, and only then did he come reaching back toward the life he had set on fire, hoping the ashes might still be warm enough to crawl into. Tyler called again a few days later with more details I had not asked for, but by then, the story was already moving through our shared circle in fragments. Vanessa had apparently confronted Ethan after he saw the messages on her phone. She did not even try very hard to lie. According to Tyler, she told him he had made their whole situation far more serious in his head than it ever was in reality. She said he was fun, convenient, exciting for a while, but that Grant was her real boyfriend, the one she actually saw a future with. I remember standing by the sink when Tyler told me that, staring out the window at the pale afternoon sky over the parking lot behind my building. How did Ethan take it, I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Badly, Tyler said. Really badly. He kept saying she had lied to him, that she had promised she was ending things with Grant. Apparently, she told him he heard what he wanted to hear. That line stayed with me. He heard what he wanted to hear because that was exactly what Ethan had done with me, too. He heard loyalty and mistook it for permanence. He heard patience and mistook it for weakness. He heard my love and convinced himself it would still be waiting no matter what he did with it. Tyler also told me Ethan had been falling apart at work. He had shown up late multiple times, missed deadlines, and gotten into some kind of heated argument with his manager over a shipping error that should have been caught days earlier. People had been covering for him for weeks, but eventually their patience ran out. He was fired that same week, not suspended. Not warned again, fired. A month earlier, hearing that might have felt like justice by then. It just felt sad. Not because I pied him in the way I once would have, but because it was another confirmation of what I had finally accepted. Betrayal does not just break trust, it corrodes the person committing it to. Quietly at first, then all at once, I heard through Rachel that Ethan had started calling mutual friends, asking if anyone had spoken to me, asking if there was any chance I would meet with him just once. Nobody agreed to get involved. A few people told him directly that what he had done was unforgivable. Others just ignored him. The version of him that had stood in Marcus's kitchen and spoken to me like I was beneath him had become impossible for anyone to unsee. Meanwhile, my own life became quieter. Not perfect, not magically healed, but quieter in a way that felt clean. It has been 3 weeks since that night at Marcus's party. Sometimes that feels impossible to me. 3 weeks is nothing. 3 weeks is a blink. And yet I feel like I have aged through a whole other life inside that time. The apartment is mine again, not ours, mine. The first weekend after Ethan left, I rearranged the furniture. I moved the chair by the window to the opposite wall. I donated a box of books he had left behind. I took down every photo of us, not dramatically, just methodically, one frame at a time. I changed the sheets, bought new towels, replaced the cheap candle he used to hate with one that smelled like cedar and orange peel, and lit it every evening as if I were slowly reclaiming oxygen. I started going to the gym in the mornings before work. At first, I did it because I could not sleep past 5:30 anyway, but after a few days, it became something else, a ritual proof that my body still belonged to me. That discipline could be a form of healing when everything else felt shapeless. I started reading again, too. Long novels, essays, anything that reminded me there were worlds larger than the one I had been trapped inside. I cooked for myself at night and played music while I cleaned the kitchen. Little things, ordinary things, but every small act felt like a stitch pulling me back together. Marcus and I are still close. His wedding is in 2 months, and I am still invited. Jennifer insisted on it. She told me over coffee last week that if anything, what happened made her more certain that she wanted me there, not less. Ethan will not be at the reception. Marcus held firm on that. Apparently, there was some pushback from a few relatives who wanted to keep things civil, but Jennifer shut that down fast. I appreciated that more than I expected. As for Ethan and Vanessa, whatever twisted version of a relationship, they thought they had barely lasted a week after everything came out. Once Ethan realized she had been using him, and once she realized he was no longer useful as a source of attention and adrenaline, the whole thing imploded. Tyler said Ethan showed up at her apartment once wanting answers. She refused to let him in. A neighbor threatened to call the police if he did not leave. Last I heard, Ethan had moved back in with his parents, about an hour outside the city, unemployed, sleeping in his childhood bedroom. Rachel told me he has been posting vague, wounded quotes on social media lately, the kind that never mention anyone by name, but are obviously written for an audience. I do not see them myself. He is blocked everywhere, but apparently the posts are full of lines about betrayal lessons and people not appreciating what they had until it was gone. That irony would be funny if it were not so hollow. Rachel still checks in on me sometimes. She feels guilty for not seeing the affair sooner, but I told her the truth. It was never her responsibility to catch what Ethan worked so hard to conceal. He lied well. He managed impressions. That was part of who he was, maybe more than I ever understood while I was loving him. People keep asking whether I am dating anyone, and the answer is no. I am not ready, but I am not bitter either. That surprises me sometimes. I expected heartbreak, to leave something uglier behind, some instinct to harden permanently. Instead, what I feel most is relief. Relief that I found out before I married him. Relief that I did not finance a sapphire ring and hand it to a man who was already destroying us in secret. Relief that the worst public humiliation of my life ended up exposing the truth before I became legally or financially tied to someone who could look me in the face and betray me without flinching. Sometimes I still think about that exact moment at the party. The room going silent. The way my body locked in place when Ethan said I could never be a good wife. At the time, it felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I see it differently. It was not the moment my life fell apart. It was the moment I was forced to stop living inside a lie. A few people have asked whether I ever confronted Vanessa directly beyond blocking her message. I did not. She is not worth the energy it would take to explain to her what decency looks like. And honestly, any confrontation would have been more for my ego than for justice. People like her do not transform because they are finally told the truth. They just move on to the next person willing to believe them. Other people have asked if Ethan ever gave me a real apology, something beyond his rambling messages, once his backup fantasy collapsed. No, what he offered was not an apology. It was desperation. There's a difference. An apology owns the wound you created whether or not it changes the outcome. Desperation only appears when consequences become personal, and for everyone who keeps asking about the ring. No, I never bought it. I had thought about proposing this Christmas. I had looked at options, compared prices. Imagine that sapphire catching candlelight in some quiet restaurant while he smiled across the table at me. I think about that sometimes too, not with longing, with gratitude. Because I did not buy it. I did not kneel. I did not bind myself to someone who saw devotion as something to exploit until something shinier came along. I walked away with my dignity intact, and that was more than anything.